There are so many good reasons why it's hard to feel as men.
Oh, yeah.
And I see this so often that we feel like we're the broken one. Like, well, why are other people feeling? Why are other people crying? Why is my partner, if I'm with women, have such access to emotion? Like, something's wrong with me, and nothing is wrong with you. There are so many conditions that have led to men's closure of their hearts.
Hello, friend, and welcome to the Sex Upgraded podcast, a podcast for men all about sex, where we'll combine real, authentic, and down-to-earth conversations about sex, life, and relationships with some pretty wild personal stories and practical how-to episodes as well, with guest experts from around the world to help you have the most amazing sex life you can possibly have. My name is Taylor, and I'll be your host on this journey, and it's my goal with each episode to give you practical, actionable things you can start doing today to improve your sex life and your entire life, because a thriving sex life will help you thrive in all areas of your life. So let's begin today's episode by starting with a deep breath in through the nose into the belly together. Exhaling with an audible sigh. And let's get into today's episode. Hello, friend, and welcome to this episode of the Sex Upgraded podcast. Today, I'm joined by my good friend Thomas, and we are going to have what I imagine will be a really interesting discussion about some of the most common ways men get blocked in their lives. Ways that keep us from thriving in sex, life, relationship, family, purpose, all of that. And Thomas and I are actually collaborating to create an in-person retreat and program for men later this year. And when we were talking about this and visioning it, we sat with each other and did some inventory and thought about, like, what are the ways that we have grown in our lives? And specifically, what are the pieces of magic that we each bring to the work that we're already doing with men? Thomas has been doing men's work and facilitating men's work for a while also. And we found out that there were some really cool ways that the pieces that we brought fit together in ways that we both didn't have as much of. So we've been learning from each other in this process. And without saying more, I'm going to say, welcome, Thomas. I'm so excited to what we're going to get into today with personal stories and feedback and all that stuff. Yeah. And would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Taylor. And I'm looking forward to what we don't know is going to come out of us in this podcast.
Yeah.
And using it as an opportunity to deepen in our understanding of ourselves and one another and what's wanting to happen through this collaboration and the energies that we're both carrying into this creative process together.
Yeah. So can you say just a little bit about the work you have been doing with men so far?
Yeah. So I run an organization called The Heart of Men. And historically, we've run these 6-month brotherhood councils where we meet weekly as a group online, and we gather once or twice in person in Asheville, North Carolina. And we have men from all walks of life. In this last group, we had a sales executive from Oracle right next to a man who had just gotten out of federal prison for 5 years. And so it's a really wide range of men answering the question and wrestling with the question of what does it mean to be a man at these times? You know, what are we carrying on the inside? How is that meeting the expectations we're provided on the outside? And so that work has been one of the deepest vehicles for my own expression and a place of my own learning and my own growth, and also a place to share some of those deepest wisdoms that I've lived into in my own life. And then we also run some shorter 2-day events called Breathwork and Brotherhood that we do all along the country. So that's the overview of Heart of Men.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did we meet?
We met. So I reached out to you about helping facilitate or even teach within one of the longer 6-month Heart of Men councils. And my draw to you was, can we start
Totally
move into that? Yeah. In my experience of you from afar, you know, in some same spaces, and then also my wife even shared a reflection of how she experiences you. I saw you as somebody carrying a really initiated expression of your root. And my experience of you was somebody living with their relationship to their sexuality integrated, alive and integrated. And as we'll get into this conversation, I imagine that's something that I'm stretching into in my own life. And so as I think about the men that I serve and what I'm able to offer through my own experience, that is not an area where I feel able to hold the same depth of space as other matters. And less about the content and more about even the energetic, of like, I can't hold that possibility of this is the highest outcome of the relationship to sexuality because I haven't lived it yet. And I can't actually offer anything that I haven't lived. And so seeing that in you, I felt this feeling of Taylor's needed in these spaces. And what I have meeting what Taylor has could create something really special for men. And so I reached out to you, I think via email, not even through any of our mutual friends. And I was like, hey, dude, there might be something around co-facilitation in one of my councils. Let's hop on the phone and talk. That was 8 months ago, 7 months ago. And fast forward, and now we're not doing a council together, but there's this program that is still bridging the energies that we each hold.
Yeah. Decided to actually collaborate.
Yeah.
Instead of just bringing it into your program.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you for that reflection.
Yeah.
And to be clear, if you're listening and wondering, some of the people who've been listening to this podcast for a while know that I've been to all kinds of sex parties and had all these, wild experiences. I have not dated or been sexual with your wife, because you mentioned your wife had a perspective of me. So I just want to clarify that as well for the context of everything.
Totally.
So there was not that personal sexual interaction, but it sounds like it was more of how she perceives me in community or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And I'll say one of the things I learned through getting to know you more and appreciate about the piece that you bring is this heart piece. Access to emotionality, access to poetry, access to depth and love in a certain way that I've had to work very hard to open up within myself. So while I feel like I have the sexual domain very not even adequately, beautifully covered in my life. For example, it took until my late 20s to be even able to tell some of my close family members that I loved them because I was so blocked in that part of my life. And people who've known me for over 10 years have seen a massive transition into more heart openness in a way that has been really beautiful and connective and helped people trust me more. But it's still a growth edge for me. And so what I see between us is this really awesome synergy that we could bring to a workshop experience. And this is why we were like, oh, we've got to actually co-create this thing because there's a lot of juice here and there's a lot of magic here.
Yeah. And it makes me want to highlight too, Taylor, is that the way that I've perceived your work around sexuality, some people might be arriving wanting to have better sex, but the way that I've come to know you is your life mission is not to just help people have better sex. It's to have access to this massive energetic vitality that lives in our root, and sex is an expression of that vitality, but it's access to that energy. It's life force that was given to us that's trying to be a part of our lives. And for so many good reasons in our world, men and women in the Western context have such little access to this part of us. And I see the heart in the same way, we're not just exploring our feelings and being emotional for the sake of exploring our feelings and being emotional. It's because it's information. It's some part of us that is trying to connect the rest of our system to be fully resourced, to be fully alive, so we can walk out in the world to do that thing that we came to this earth to do. And so to me, I feel really turned on in our collaboration because we're talking about what is it that we each bring? What is it that we're each still learning that allows this possibility for somebody to be fully alive, for their energy system to be online, for it to be thriving, for them to know what it's telling them, and for them to be able to channel that energy into what they're wanting to put it into. And so that was another one of my draws towards you, was it seemed more than let's just have better sex or let's last longer in bed. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of guys with that goal.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to overcome premature ejaculation. Oh, I want to overcome erectile dysfunction, which is very nice and useful to overcome those things. Yeah. And also what almost always happens is they're like, holy shit, my work life has vastly improved 8 weeks into this, or my relationship with my partner is way better, or all these other things happen as a sort of a byproduct. Yeah. And in my mind, it's not a byproduct. It's very linked together. We just have this illusion in our society that our sexuality lives in a little box isolated in our genitals, but actually unblocking that and allowing it to move through our system and harnessing that allows us to thrive in all areas of our life. Yeah. And so I think it is important to say that it is possible to have really functionally good sex without access to the heart and emotionality in a way that also doesn't allow you to thrive in the world, right? Similarly, it's also possible to have access to lots of emotionality and deep feelings without being able to skillfully interact with it in a way that allows you to thrive in the world, right? So what we're really talking about is a way to integrate both of these things in a powerful, skillful way that really uplifts everything. And on that note, one of the things I've really appreciated about learning from other teachers and other facilitators is when I hear some about their own journey. Like, how did they get to be where they are now? And what are some of the blocks that they had to overcome? Like, it really helps me trust them more and helps me just feel just excited to know their humanness, you know, instead of just seeing them up on stage and like thinking, oh, they've got it all figured out and they've always had it figured out. Like, I know nobody operates that way, but I thought it would be really cool for us to share some of the blocks that we have overcome. For me in the sexual domain, how I've overcome things like sexual shame, sexual inadequacy, and for you in the emotional domain.
Yeah, totally. And I want to say too, Taylor, as we dive in, I don't have it figured out. I'm still such a student to life. I'm still totally humbly at the feet of this deep feeling center that lives inside of me that I'm coming to know and learn from and be guided by, you know? And anything that I offer or share is not coming from an external, learned, programmed, conditioned explanation. It's coming from my own felt sense of the world, and it's still such a work in progress. And so I love standing in a group of men. I love standing with you and feeling like I have something to offer to serve these men, and I am still such a work in progress. And so as we share these blocks and maybe even some stories of the overcoming of these blocks, I want to present too that there's still plenty of blocks in my life, and I'm still overcoming the blocks that I've overcome in the past, and I'm not arrived. And I really hope that some of what we share, somebody sees themselves in that, and it provides a little bit of space and a little more resource to find a different relationship to what's blocked in their own life, you know, but not because we have it figured out, but because we're walking that path right next to them and we're holding out a hand and saying, hey brother, I've gone through something like this. Let's learn together.
100%. So part of this also, after we share some of the blocks that we have been working with in the past, I'd love to share, like, what am I working with now? Because there are some blocks that I'm working with now. It sounds like there are for you too. And that's very real. And that's just what it's like to be a man. You know? And that's what it's like to be a human and be a human who's devoted to living a rich, full life. So thanks for saying that.
Totally. Is there something, I have a feeling, I want to receive a story from you first. Like, is there something that feels really up to share?
Totally. Well, I've got my list here. List of stories. So I think I'd like to start with shame. Sexual shame. Sexual shame is a block that most men experience. Some form of sexual shame. Like, most guys can identify something in their life that created that eventually. But maybe it's, it'll look different for a lot of people. So here's a personal story, and I'll share a couple of them and how I kind of worked through them. Started when I was 5. Go figure. A lot of stuff comes from childhood. And I've shared this before in a different conversation, but in kindergarten, there's show and tell, right? And everybody brings in their favorite things to show, like bring in trucks, crystals, dolls, whatever, you know? And I knew it was show and tell. So I brought one of my favorite things and went around the group in the circle, and people were sharing their things. And when it came to me, I stood up, and with a lot of excitement and just happiness, I just pulled down my pants and said, I brought my penis. Look. And all the kids are like, wow. And they loved it. And it was this totally innocent thing, you know, like, look at this thing hanging off of my body. Like, it's so cool. Like, wow, what an interesting thing. And my teacher started screaming at me and yelling at me. It was like, Taylor, no, that's bad. Put that away. What are you doing? And just like came at me with this intensity that was so much, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I totally went into like this freeze fawn response, and I tucked my penis back up inside my shorts and sat down, and all the kids kind of felt this contraction in that moment, and it took me at least 20 years to realize the impact that had had on my sexuality, which was from that point on, I carried this deep-seated belief or felt sense in my body that my penis was something to be ashamed of, and that it wasn't worthy of loving, nice, pleasurable touch, and so like when I would masturbate, I would just masturbate to get off. I would like jack off, go for the release. And in sexual experiences with women, I would pleasure them and have sex. But when it came to me receiving, like I always felt like there was something dirty or wrong about my penis, and that it wasn't good for their mouths to be on it, or their hands or whatever, and I still allowed it to happen. But even when it was happening, there was this internal program that was hard to relax into the experience. It just kept me from experiencing that pleasure. And so, that was a surprising thing to realize. And then to realize that most people have something like that, when they were told bad around their sexuality from their parents, from teachers, from something like that. And you might not realize the impact for years to come, but there could be one.
Can I ask you, Taylor, how did that memory, how and when did that bubble to the surface?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting question. Yeah. It bubbled to the surface actually in a ritual process when I was in a retreat. Yeah. And I was receiving sacred spot stimulation. Or another way you could call it would be anal de-armoring. Yeah. And basically what it looked like was somebody had their finger inside my anus, and it was not a sexual pleasuring focused experience, but the goal was to release anything that might be stuck in the body, stuck in the system. And the wild thing about experiences like that is you don't intellectually know what's going to happen. Yeah. And then you could be laying there and all of a sudden this memory can just flash back, and all of a sudden you just feel these tears well up, or your body contracts, or maybe it's heat that runs across your body. And for me, it was this sort of tension, heat that started to come up. And I was like, oh God, I don't like this. It's very uncomfortable. Yeah. And then there was this grief that came. And then I flashed to that. Yeah. I flashed to that image of my teacher in that moment. I was like, holy shit. And I just like cried and cried with this person's finger inside of me, with this emotional music playing loudly in the background, and just released. And in that release process, that started to shift. Yeah. And it wasn't like that healed everything, but it opened the door for me to then cultivate a more loving and powerfully reverent relationship with my genitals.
I'm going to ask one more question.
Yeah.
If you hadn't actually gone back to that moment and you had worked really hard to love your genitals, do you think you would have arrived at the same place of integration that you have now?
I think it's possible that it could have happened another way. Yeah. Like, for example, I don't think everybody needs to go out and have an anal de-armoring experience in the same way to achieve different levels of growth. It can be really helpful, but I think I've done a lot of other processes that could have come up in very easily, so I am sure that it would have come up somewhere in my life eventually. Yeah.
I ask because I want to highlight two things on a little bit of a meta basis as we're like weaving stories. And the first is that we're almost responsible we are not responsible for almost any of our blocks. Like most of the things that have happened to us were pre-verbal, early childhood, young adulthood, and things happen to us where we learn to shut down life to survive. And so it's not that we're not responsible, but it's not our fault. And so that's the biggest piece to begin with to me, that we can't even look at that place that feels so untouchable or so blocked because we're so scared it says something about who we are. Yeah. But the reality is, like, what happened to you at 5 years old, like, that was unfair. I feel sadness hearing that story, right? Yeah. And yet it happened to you and you're responsible for the healing. And so the second thing that I'm wanting to call out is that when the conditions are ripe, the healing happens. And I see that in my life over and over and over again, that when the conditions are there, we have this innate intelligence that wants to heal. Like that memory bubbling up, your conscious mind hadn't thought about that. How old were you when you did the sacred spot ritual?
Like 20.
Okay, so in 25 years, your conscious mind had not thought about that experience, but it was there. And the second the space was available for something that needed to get unblocked, there comes the body's intelligence and a memory bubbles up.
Yeah.
Like how brilliant is that? I mean, it breaks my heart how much that our bodies and our spirits want to heal. Like our orientation is towards healing and towards wholeness. But if we don't have the conditions to do it, we can't heal.
Yeah.
And so that to me is why men's spaces have been so impactful in my own life, a really well-held ritual space or ceremony or therapeutic space, because the conditions are ripe for the healing to happen. And it's not because somebody came in and did some miraculous act on you in that moment. You were healing yourself.
Yeah.
That bubbled up yourself. Somebody didn't go digging for a childhood memory.
Yeah.
You were present with your body, touching a place in our body where we hold an incredible amount of tension. And there came the healing through your own experience. And I want to highlight that for anybody listening or watching, like we have the innate capacity to heal. It's not our therapist. It's not the plant medicine. It's not the shaman. Those people are guides, but the healing is happening from within because our bodies want to be well. Given everything, the bad water we drink, the bad food we eat, the air that we're breathing in, all of the Wi-Fi, all the cell phones, our dopamine addictions, amongst all of that, our bodies are like thriving, longing to be well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a breath to that. Yeah. And now if you're listening and you're thinking, well, but Taylor, you did say somebody had their finger inside of you. Yes, it's true, but they weren't doing any kind of fancy technique. Like the deal with that is their hand is just a placeholder for you to do your own work. Yeah. There's no fancy curling of the finger or any directionality to it. It's just like they're there to hold space for you to go into your own process. Yeah. So 100%. Now, if I were to have not ever gone into any sort of growth spaces or ritualized spaces or healing spaces like that, I probably wouldn't have healed that. And I probably would have perpetuated and kept living out those patterns. Yeah. But just to also give a frame for what the healing and integration looked like, what that opened up for me in the sexual experience was the ability to just like fully receive and be worshiped, allow my partner to worship my genitals and my body in a way that just felt so fucking good, in a way that I had been doing for years to other people, but had not allowed myself to receive. And the ability to receive that in the sexual experience just opened up a whole different flavor of existence for me. Like, oh, wow, I'm worthy of receiving. Like I'm worthy of receiving that kind of praise and pleasure to this area of my body that has been so shut down, that's shamed by society. Wow. I stand taller in the world now, It's really amazing, the ripple effects from that.
I want to say there, Taylor, that like it is life's design for us to be well. It is life's design for us to feel pleasure, for us to feel alive, for us to feel like we have everything that we need. Like life wants us to be well. And so in places where we're not well, right? So like in that place for you, where you felt incapable of receiving or unworthy of receiving, our design is for wellness. And so if there's a place where we're not well, it's probably because we're blocked. And we're probably blocked because something happened to us that was not our fault. And that's like the unlock to me, is those places that feel unlookable, that we've held down for so long, the blocks we can't even look at. Those are the biggest detriments to the life that we know is possible. Yeah. And we're allowed to turn towards them. I feel pride in your experience of like that coming up, of like that 5-year-old memory and the courage to say that at 5 years old had this much of an impact on me. I'm like this porous, sensitive being at 5 years old. That one thing that teacher said, amongst a bunch of other bullshit, I'm sure, that happened to you culturally, but like that made it impossible for me to have real pleasure in my sexuality for 14 years. And so that like, yeah, it gives me hope. And it just reminds me like life wants us to be well, and where we're not well, it's not our fault. And yet we're responsible for opening to the healing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we want to experience things, we got to go into it.
Yeah.
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 So that's the story on my end.
Yeah.
Do you have a story you could share with us?
Yeah. Let's see what wants to bubble up. So most of my conscious adulthood, and I don't mean conscious like conscious, I just mean most of my adulthood that I can recall, it's been really hard for me to trust my own motivations. Like I do the right things and they're skillful, but it's been hard at times, many times, and even now still, to really trust why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because some part of me knows that it's derived from my mind that's understanding, that can look at a situation and understand the full scope of what's going on. And in my mid-20s, I was running a social impact startup, and I was living between New York and London, and had been in LA and DC before then. And we were like doing the thing, man. We had raised money. We were making a difference, having a big impact. We had 8 employees. Like it was fun. It was dynamic. We were speaking around the country. And yet some part of me wasn't there, you know, like doing all of the right things. And yet some part of me wasn't there. And
what do you mean by wasn't there?
I couldn't actually be in the experience that was happening. I always wanted it to be something else or something more. There was an eventual destination. Like I wasn't landed in what was happening. You know, like we'd be on these big stages speaking, and like, it's like 80% of me was actually there having the experience. And I would say at that time, Taylor, like I was good at life. Like I was good at life, you know, like I knew what I needed. I knew what I didn't need. My discipline was strong. My exercise habits were strong, but like I wasn't fully there. And I was living in London with my partner, and this was my partner of 4 years at the time. And we got unexpectedly and excitingly pregnant. And we were actually like at the beginning of perhaps decomposing our relationship, because we had come to this point of like, maybe this was a thing for our 20s. And I don't know if we're supposed to have family together. Yeah. But then we got pregnant. And so within a couple weeks, like she quits her job. We get out of our London lease. We're moving back to life on land. Like if we're having a baby, we're moving to land. And I changed the whole orientation around work. Like we turned down a funding round because I was like, I'm not going to keep growing this company if we're having this child. And 2 days before we're set to fly back, 8 suitcases packed, like all of our belongings, like ending life in cities, we lose the pregnancy. And it was too late to turn back. Like I remember we had to, in London, it's public health care. And so the only way to get an ultrasound before then is to go see a private OB. Well, actually the first time we went to a termination clinic just to get an ultrasound. And then the second time was, so we just paid $800 to see this private OB because we thought we had miscarried and we were about to fly across the continent, across the ocean. And I remember, like he tells us that we've indeed miscarried. There was a heartbeat earlier and now there's not a heartbeat. And we're like walking back to the bus to go to our flat. And I remember feeling like I want to step in front of one of these buses, because everything that I had associated with or known or had felt important, I had like cast down for the call of fatherhood. And then suddenly that had also evaporated. And so I'll fast forward a little bit, and I could tell that story in much more depth. There's other layers, many layers, but I ended up landing in these mountains and Asheville, outside of Asheville. And
with your partner?
With my partner. And then we soon after that ended up splitting up. And she went to Pakistan for work, and we had this little stretch of like not communicating to really have discernment of what was needing to happen. But the day she took off, we were in San Francisco. I was there for work, and I like took her to the airport, put her on the plane. And the second I got back to the hotel, I just started weeping in a way that I've never cried in my whole life. And just weeping and weeping and weeping. And for the next 6 months, almost every single day, there was a moment where I would be doing something and so much grief would overcome me that I would need to fall to the floor and just be with those feelings. And I was so overwhelmed and had no map for what any of this meant. And even my closest friends, who I got some good friends, were like, Thomas, we're worried about you. You know, my parents, who were like, have a deep relationship with a greater power were like, Thomas, this is a lot. And I was like, but something is happening. Something is happening. And it's not this simple, but for the sake of this conversation, on the other side of that was the first time I began to actually feel like I had landed in my life. It was the first time I felt like I could actually trust myself, because no longer was I living from my calculated view of the world, but instead I was living from my felt sense of reality. It's as if those tears, as if those feelings were coming in as information to guide me and show me what was actually the life that was mine to live. And so fast forward 5 years from there, you know, and I'm still in that dance of like, when I'm out of my body and I'm not in my feelings, I really don't trust myself, because I'm coming from this like mental frame of the world. And the mind is awesome, but the mind is limited in its capacity to see what's available in the world. You know, we know it's like its job is to reduce things to a category, because that's how we've survived. You know, our job is to see things as inanimate. Like that's how the mind works. And it's this continued practice of like coming back to my feelings and letting them inform how I'm supposed to be spending my days, what is worthy of my time, what is mine to actually do on this earth. And so that's not like a one story spin, you know, it's a continued relationship. Right. And it's this block that I had until I was 26 years old from feeling anything. Like I saw things and I knew I was supposed to be feeling them. And I felt like a thought of sadness as watching trees be cut down or watching animals die. But on the other side of that, I was actually with those things that was happening. And that has been my greatest guide. And it still is. Like I've had a lot of grief the past couple months. And on the other side of those cries, I'm like, I know what I have to do. And there's no doubt in me that it's going to happen. And it's those feelings that are informing what's supposed to happen.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And when I hear you share that, I think, well, you could have easily strong-armed it and just gotten back on the train and gone back to startup world or done the right thing. You know, I'm doing air quotes if you're listening and not watching this on YouTube. Do the right thing, become quote unquote successful again, like build yourself back up. But no, instead you took some time to really feel and listen. That's what I'm hearing. And then from that, new information came through about how you really wanted to be living.
Yeah. It's like before that experience, I didn't have access to the ocean. And so I was like pulling from a really limited pool of information. Like maybe I just had a little small creek. And then as I opened, I was like, oh, I have the ocean's intelligence and movement guiding me. And so there was so much more to pull from to know what is mine to do. Like what is actually this life that's going to fulfill me. And so they were massive waves, but I still welcome those waves because like it's so much life that's moving through me. And there's an intelligence that's far greater than mine that knows what I actually want deep down and what I actually am capable of. And that's so much greater than my idea of myself. If I had just gotten back on the startup train, raised the round of funding, gone forth and done the same thing that I'd always done. And we actually did end up going on and staying with that company, but it wasn't from the same perspective. Like I was no longer the good hero Thomas saving the world. I was like, my perspective was very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a question for you.
Yeah.
It sounds like the conditions that you experienced were a perfect storm to throw you into that, right? But there's a lot of guys out there, including myself in the past, who maybe didn't have that same like bunch of stuff happening all at once, who might also still be living in this place of doing the quote unquote right thing, you know? How does emotionality play into that? Are there other ways to access without being thrust into this super intensive experience? You know?
I don't know how much you're going to like my answer, Taylor, and I'm going to tell you what's true is, you know, we were talking about in your story that our bodies want to heal. Our orientation is actually towards their highest functioning, which is healing. You know, it's being whole. When a tree loses a branch, it knows to heal because it wants to be the fullest oak tree that it can be. That's in its DNA. And to me, life, which we're not that separate from, actually, we are life, you know, is also providing the conditions for us to heal. And so I really believe if somebody is like hearing these words and something is sparking in their heart of like, man, I feel that own emotional opening happening in my world. I feel that deep sensitivity that I shut down as a kid that's wanting to like burgeon forth in my life. I can almost assure you the conditions are coming in life to make that possible. And it might not be a lost partnership and a lost child, but it might be a lost parent or a lost friend, or it might be something so subtle, but the conditions are there. And I feel like all I can offer is to open to the conditions that are present, to open to those conditions.
Yeah, so that's still a choice.
Yeah.
Right? You could easily numb out, get on social media, watch porn, drink alcohol, smoke weed, like do whatever to avoid that, which is what a large portion of people do.
Yeah.
Or you could turn towards that.
Yeah.
With what you're saying too, I think now of some of the biggest emotional opening experiences I've had in my life. And it's what you're saying. You know, I put myself in this space of the right conditions to be able to have an experience like that. And there were conditions in my life that led me to that moment, and I chose to go into a certain kind of container or experience that would allow for me to feel, you know, more so than my everyday life, because I wasn't able to access those kinds of things living in my everyday life. I needed to have an experience of either being at a group ritual or some sort of therapeutic type something, so I could open in that way.
There are so many techniques, you know, and there are people like, hundreds of therapists that could sit here and they could teach us tapping, they could teach us EFT, they could teach us all these modalities to help us access our feelings. And I think those are awesome. And that's not how I've come into my own feelings. Yeah. I've come into them because life said, Thomas, feel. And I did say yes, there was choice there. But what I want to say is, and this is something we're going to cover in the course, is that there are so many good reasons why it's hard to feel as men.
Oh, yeah.
And I see this so often that we feel like we're the broken one. Like, well, why are other people feeling? Why are other people crying? Why is my partner, if I'm with women, have such access to emotion? Like something's wrong with me, and nothing is wrong with you. There are so many conditions that have led to men's closure of their hearts. So that's happening. And just like with your experience at 5 years old, it's not our fault, and we're responsible, and we have choice. And so what I want to offer is, it's not an overnight transformation, just like we're talking about with our sexuality. Like, we don't go from a whole lot of distortion and brokenness for 28 years to thriving sexuality in 1 month, you know? We don't go from numbness and frozenness to wild open-heartedness in 1 month. And so what I want to offer is, like, our bodies know when something catches our attention. We're scrolling on Instagram and we see a video of something in Palestine, and something in us is like, whoa. But then our conditioned patterns, like, we'll just keep scrolling and cover that up and see something pretty that's going to cover that up. What happens in that moment if we take a pause? You know, what happens if we're driving down the highway and we see like a homeless woman limping with a hurt right knee, and something in us, like, something catches. Even if we can't feel it, something catches. Can we just pause for 15 seconds and be with that? You don't need to cry. You don't need to have a big cathartic release. It doesn't even need to look emotive, but that's the building of the muscle. It's saying, hey, life, I notice what you're showing me, and I'm putting my attention there. And you talk about this a lot in Orgasmic Mastery, you know, like, attention is energy. Attention is energy. Attention is energy. And so if we notice that flicker in our heart, that flicker in our chest that is trying to feel, that sees something and wants to have a feeling about it, and we can put our attention there, even for 15 seconds as a practice, and then go forth with our day. And then when it happens again, maybe try 20 seconds. And over time, we're reopening that pathway that has learned to close. Yeah. Yeah.
I like that. I like that.
Me too.
It's good. It's good. And I'll say too, there might be some people listening right now who might be thinking, yeah, well, there's this trend in the whole conscious or new age scene or whatever for men to just dive off the deep end into the feeling world and then lose their zest or their masculinity or whatever, or success or vitality, whatever you want to call it, you know? And I can relate in certain ways to some of my experiences. But also I just wanted to say that the bigger experience that I've had is that through opening to emotionality and the intelligence that came through that, when I allowed those energies to flow in my system, was more vitality, was more success in my life in general, not just financially, but through friendships, through community, through all kinds of stuff. And it really just opened the door for a deeper, more rich experience of life that fed me in more ways than I really could imagine.
Yeah.
You know?
I know that my strongest moments, the moments that I've most felt like a warrior, come on the other side of grief. Like I feel what's happening to a forest. And once I feel it, I can't skip the feeling part. But once the tears come and I really let myself settle into what it means to be alive when we've lost 98% of our old growth forest in this continent and we're cutting down the last 2%. I let myself feel that. And then it's like the floodgates open and I stand up and I'm like, I will put my body in the way of that happening. Like I'm a warrior on behalf of life. Like the access to strength and fierceness from that place after I felt is unlike anything that I could manufacture by trying to be a man or by having the right testosterone levels or going to the gym. Like it's this, like, it's aligning me with life's design for my life, which is, I really believe we are warriors as men. We are like the protectors of life. And so when we feel where life is being violated, where we feel like life is not being treated in the ways we know in our hearts it should be treated, that's what activates that like piercing masculine warrior. And it is so much more gratifying to be the piercing masculine warrior for me on behalf of life, instead of manufacturing it in like a primal exercise where we're getting in touch with the warrior. Totally. It's like my body actually knows how to be the warrior when I have something worthy to defend.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I know now in this society there has been for years all this talk and questioning of like, what does it mean to be a man? What is masculinity? And they've asked all kinds of people from all different backgrounds. And one of the biggest things that keeps coming through across all genders and sexual orientations is this idea of being a protector, you know, having some sort of protective impact, caring for the people that you care about, protecting them, providing for, like that sort of a vibe, you know? And I just love the way you said that. Like you can have so much more of a deep, impactful protectiveness if you really feel it versus just staying up here in the head and being like, I'm going to like do all the right things to make sure everything is set, you know, like there's access to deeper life with that. So that feels really rich.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're flowing.
Yeah. Should we do another story? Oh, look at that. We've been going for a little while. Well, maybe we can just list off some of the other like common ways men get blocked. Well, or we can pause for a moment too and have a meta moment. Where do we want to go from here?
I want to highlight something that I want to highlight something. I want to shift gears a little bit.
Cool.
And I'm going to bridge a little bit into what I'm working with at present. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Like what I'm growing into. So I feel really grateful to have some cultivation of access to my feeling center and my heart, and this heart that's connected to the broader context of life. I'm like, whoa, that's good. You know, like I'm really grateful that at my age right now in life, I get access to that. Yeah. And I have felt disintegrated from my root, you know?
And when you say root, what is that to you?
My root is my sexual desires. It's like my primal connection to life. I would almost say it's an energy that isn't benevolent or malevolent. It's just this primal lifeness, you know, like it almost doesn't even have a direction. It's just like, boom, it's the earthquake, it's the fire, it's the wildness. Yeah. And so something that's happened for me is my heart has opened me to what feels like the meta, the transpersonal, the grandness of being alive. It's a connection to like a great spirit to me, to this great mother. And without the root, I miss some of the personal and I skip over some of the personal. And the thing is, I'm in a human body. I have a reproductive system that has biological wiring from millions of years of life, you know, and I'm here to be in this individual body. I'm not here just to be in the transpersonal. And so right now, some of my journey, and I'm saying this because you said that there's a narrative around men feeling too much. And I see in my own life, I'm not ready to provide some evaluation on society, but when I'm just in my feelings and I'm disconnected from my own desires, I'm not fully there. And so what I'm working to do right now is cultivate this living relationship with my root, with my sexual desires, with my own just small self personal desires, and letting those meet this greater, deeper feeling center that's connected to all of life. Yeah. And to me, the more that those two are connected, the more powerful I feel. And I've been doing Taylor's Orgasmic Mastery course your course, you know, and through that, in moments where I feel really connected to the work and what's happening, I'm like, whoa, I'm online down here and I'm pointing to my genitals, and I'm online up here and now I'm pointing to my heart if you're listening to this. And those together, it's like whoosh, whoosh, because the heart tells me where to go, and it tells me what's mine to take care of, and it makes it really clear what I'm supposed to do, and it provides some energy. But when that's plugged into my primal raw life force, those together is the dream. It's like I have access to unlimited energy, and I know exactly where it's supposed to go. And even as I say that, I'm like, I feel like that's really what we're offering in this course, you know, is like become in touch with and open up access to the magnificent nature of life moving through you, all of it, and know where it wants to go, know where it wants to be put. And so I'm on my own journey in that myself, you know, and I'm have related very much. I still feel often in my sexuality difficulty in receiving, and caught in wanting to pleasure my partner, and caught in wanting to do the right thing, and caught in stories of this is the right way to be in sexuality as a man, and letting a lot of that, like I'm still in the unspiraling. I'm not in the respiraling it together, unspiraling it into like less and less and less, and something different and something different, and expectations falling away. And from that place, I can start to feel some truth building of like, oh, this is who I really am when I let myself be that, when I let myself want things. So I want to pepper that in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pepper it in, throw it in, dump the whole bucket in like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I appreciate that a lot. And I feel that too. And a couple of the schools that I've studied in around sex, Tantra, they say it's, to pepper this piece in too, they say it's entirely possible for you to develop a powerful sex life and be effective in the world, but then skip your heart too. But then in doing so, you're going to miss arguably some of the most beautiful experiences you could possibly experience as a human. So why would you ever rob yourself of that? Like you could do that, but what a waste, you know, what a tragic loss, you know? And so I really do feel like the integration of sexual potency, unblocking all those sexual blocks, figuring out where our sexual energy leaks are and plugging those and bringing that energy into our life, like looking at where we feel sexually inadequate and working on that and building that up, and then integrating that with emotional openness and ability to receive from the world and ability to actually feel and gather wisdom from that. Like that's fucking superhero shit right there. Like that's it, you know, like then from that place, there's so much aliveness and life force internally that you're going to have clarity on where you want to put your energy. You know, you're going to take more intentional choices in the world. And that's what happens. And I've experienced that in my life, you know, and it lights me up to think about. And that's in large part why I'm doing the work that I'm doing in the world, and why I'm so excited about this collaboration too, because I think you really bring a piece around the heart and emotionality that I can't fully deliver yet, that I'm learning from you too. And it's helping me integrate more. Even on a meta level, the process of collaborating is me opening to that and being more receptive to collaboration, to input from the outside world, you know, to receiving. So it's a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Yeah. I want to ask a question, Taylor, and then there's something I want to share, but I don't want to share it first. So if I lose it, I lose it. Do you want to share anything about your journey from the root up, and like what it's been for you as you've come into your own feelings and heart? And you were sharing that like some people in your late 20s to say, I love you. And then people have reflected back so much growth in the past 10 years. And I hear you saying you're still so much in process there. Mm-hmm. And I almost am asking this not so you simply vulnerably share in a podcast, but more to maybe offer an imprint for men listening that can be like, oh yeah, that's me too. You know, like what you've been given from our culture, what you've given from your own dad, even maybe.
Totally.
And then what you're finding for yourself.
Yeah. Well, there's this piece that just came through for me that I want to bring in that relates to that when I think back to some of the pivotal moments that my heart did open and I experienced more emotionality. If you're not watching the video, Thomas drew his hand up from his genitals to his heart. And it really actually in this moment anchored something for me, which was that I don't think I would have been able to have a lot of those heart opening type experiences had I not started working with my sexual blocks and my sexual leaks. So another way to say that more practically is I used to be really addicted to porn.
Yeah.
I used to masturbate and ejaculate regularly to porn, and then by myself, I'm talking like every day, almost every day, so often every day. And that kept me in my mid-20s in this space of feeling depleted. I didn't even know it at the time. I didn't know what depletion was, but I didn't have clarity. I wasn't motivated. I was just like going through the motions, and then, I just want to whack off to porn again, Meanwhile, I was emotionally closed, had a hard time expressing love to people, like hugging people for longer than 2 seconds. It was scary. I was like, get the fuck away. Not that, all this stuff. But then what happened when I there was a certain point where I made a decision, like, all right, I cannot be a man and continue to ejaculate in 30 seconds or less. I cannot be a man and continue to be addicted to porn, have porn-induced erectile dysfunction, have a dysfunctional relationship where I'm not honoring my partner and receiving what I want to experience. Like, I have to know what it's like to switch this sexual domain up. I get excited about it. Talk fast, forget to breathe. So I started to do these practices of, well, number one, reducing the amount of time I watched porn and noticing how that impacted my life very positively. Go figure. The less I watched porn, the more sexually attractive I found my partner at the time. Surprise. I started to experiment with how often I was ejaculating. The less I ejaculated, the better our relationship was, the more attractive my partner was to me, and the more motivated I felt. And it started to click for me. Wow. This is what they have written books about. Like, this is why the books on my bookshelf are about this thing. And I have just only intellectualized it up until this point, but now I'm feeling it. I'm feeling this greater life come online inside me. And it's motivating me to do more productive things, be more successful in my business, do more proactive things for my relationship. And so that trend continued for a little bit. And then from that place of bigger aliveness internally, I was able to have the juice, you could say, to then experience more impactful emotional openings. Like, I remember one in particular, like the first big cracking open of me. Like, it happened after I had been cultivating these sexual practices for a few years. And it really, like, I had the juice in my body. I had the life force, and it was wanting to burst forth, and there were just the right, perfect conditions to give me the opportunity to do that. And it was incredible. And I ended up, like, you can go back and listen to this podcast episode, but I was like bawling on the floor of this sex party house with people on the second floor having wild sex above me. And I was listening to Sigur Rós being cuddled by people having like the biggest heart opening of my life, And I know for a fact that if I had been regularly masturbating and ejaculating to porn up until that point, there's no way that would have happened. I wouldn't have even found myself in this group of really loving, caring people, So it's like those conditions gave rise to the other conditions that allowed me to have that opening. And my heart and my sex kind of started to weave together in this really powerful way that led to greater openings and greater openings. Yeah. So that felt like a context that's important to share. And I still want to get back to answer your question, but I'll pause to see what you wanted to say.
Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So that was huge. That was huge. And I can't separate the two ultimately in my life. But what I will say now is that the growth edge for me is to ultimately receive more from the world, but open myself to receiving more from the world through the form of saying yes to less things, saying no to more things, being more intentional with how I spend my time, not trying to go as much. And if you are somebody listening who you've been in one of my courses or one of my private groups over the last year or so, like you've heard me talk about this. This is something I am improving on, getting better at. But there's this desire, and here's the deeper level, desire for more magic in my life, more magic in my life. And that comes from, I have like busted ass over the past, more than half a decade to create this business, to create my life where I am right now. And that has served me very well up until this point, working constantly, forgetting to eat lunch, but working constantly anyway, then getting irritable, but then like powering through it and then creating all this stuff. And in the process, haven't been as open to the magic and the mystery of life. And so I notice now there's a deep yearning for more of that.
As he points to his heart, if you're listening to this.
Yeah, pointing to my heart. Yeah, even that was unconscious, just like pointing to this part of my body. And so my strategy of slowing down is so that ultimately I can experience more of the magic and mystery of life. And there are other things I'm doing to help access that, like playing more music, which is something that my soul really feels enlivened by, and having more opportunities to deeply connect with people. But that's a growth edge for me. And I can feel that the more I step into the magic and mystery of life, the more depth I'm able to bring to this work around sex that I'm doing too, which I think also is reflected by the people who've been in my groups over the past, 6 months to a year. So that's been a really beautiful thing to see also. Opening to the mystery and the magic. Turns out it makes sex better too. And life better in general. But that's a growth area for me right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
And just to add one clarifying piece, the thing that makes that hard for me is this gnawing feeling that if I slow down, that something bad is going to happen, or that I need to be productive. I need to keep going in order to be successful. I need to make more money. I need to create better things. I need to do whatever, just keep going, because if I slow down, like I won't be X, Y, or Z, Objectively, I've been successful enough at this point, so I should be able to slow down, but there's still this voice or this story or this block that's makes it hard for me. And that's what I'm working on, is that block. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like I hear in that, Taylor, like something that's unwrapping in you or being uncovered, that maybe it's something like life has you, like something has, like you're not responsible for creating safety only on your own. Or like just got to do more because it's not enough, because I might lose or it might go away. That like, as you open to the mystery, to the magic in your words, there's a feeling of like maybe being able to flow a little bit more with the broader context of life. Yeah. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Flow a little bit more, and also taking time and spaciousness to just be in more magical experiences, and like giving that to myself too, where I'm not holding the space or creating the container.
And receiving that. Something I wanted to highlight, and then let's do a time check, because I feel like we've been rolling for a while, is I hear in your share, you talk about the like root unlocking and the sexual confidence and expression unlocking. And then from that comes access to the heart. And I'm almost following the reverse path down. It's like once I could trust myself, I'm opening this well of power. And something that's just dawning on me is, like, you could think about it evolution from an evolutionary perspective in biology, and you could also think about it from a spiritual perspective. But in the long game, in the infinite game, power goes to people who are serving life's evolution. Power goes to people who are serving life's evolution, And so people talk about, I'm not exactly sure where I remember hearing this or watching this, but like the lion that ends up winning in most, packs, it's not always just the most powerful lion. It is also a lion that has the most attunement to the group. In some ways, you could call that a sensitivity or emotional awareness. And so to me, the more I'm hearing in what you say, the more that we actually open to our heart, and it's cyclical, it's not one or the other, the more power that's online in our root, the more capacity for pleasure, the more capacity for like oomph. The more we open our heart, the more that's there, because in some ways life doesn't want to give this infinite power of the root to people who aren't going to use it well. And we see plenty of people who are living in their root and have a lot of power and aren't in their hearts, but that doesn't last in the long run. That's not what evolution is serving. Evolution, power is the capacity to create, to put something forth in the world, to like use a will to create something out of nothing. And power wants to go serve beings who are in touch with some greater context of life. And to me, that comes from the heart. And so I hear that in what you're saying, that cycle building on itself.
Yeah. I like that. And I feel like this could be a philosophical deep dive and maybe we'll just touch it briefly right now because on some levels I agree and on other levels I disagree, just only with the sense of saying that I see plenty of people who objectively have power in today's world who I would assess or judge to be cut off from both of these areas of their body. Yeah. And they've been able to create financial success for themselves and great impact. Yeah. But I would also argue that the impact is not as positively impactful as it could be. Right. And so then the question for me becomes, well, what's the point? Yeah. You know, like, what's the point of this? Is it just to get more money and have more power? Yeah. Like for me, ultimately it's to create a better world. Yeah. Right. And so yes, learn how to have non-ejaculatory orgasms so you can circulate that energy in your body and have better connection and sex with your partner, but also so that you can go out and be more effective and create a more positive impact in the world. Yeah. Like connect with your emotions more so that you can go out and be a more impactful, effective, heart-centered leader. And people feel that, you know? And so that's, you seem like you've got something on the tip of your tongue.
Well, I love that you said that. Because if you're listening to this, you're like, what do you mean power? You're telling me like Donald Trump and Joe Biden have like great relationships with their roots? Like probably not, you know? It's power. To me, it's so easily stolen and exploited. And so to me, most of the power we see in our world is because we've taken it from other people. Social media companies, whatever it is, like we've taken people's attention, we've taken their energy, we've taken their life force, and we ride that, you know, like it's almost like we're like stealing or we're like a vampire eating other people's power. That's just not interesting to me. And I know that from my 20s because like I went to a top university, graduated in honors, very smart. Like I could kind of manipulate people. Like that's part of that lack of trust. And I was doing powerful things in my 20s. Yeah. But they were coming from like shaping the room. And what I'm touching now that is 1,000% more gratifying is a power that is derived internally, that is derived from my own connection to life. And so when I talk about power, that's what I mean. Like that connection to our root, that work that you've done, that is like, gives you so much oomph, gives you so much direction. You're deriving that internally. Yeah. You're not going and taking that from other people. You're not hijacking their attention. You're not getting them addicted to your products so you receive their power. And so when that internally derived power of the root meets the internally derived power of the heart, it's like, that's the lion you want leading your tribe.
Yes. Yeah. Boom. Yeah. Word. Hallelujah. Like, totally. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, if you're listening right now or watching this on YouTube, like this vibe, like this energy that we're speaking to right here, like this is what we're wanting to bring forth in our collaboration. That is going to be a hybrid online and in-person retreat. The in-person is going to be here in Asheville and it's going to be 9 weeks online. And we'll have more logistical information about that elsewhere. Really the intention with this conversation was to give you an opportunity to get to know us more and for us to learn in this conversation ourselves and just share some of our own blocks and some of the conversation around power and energy and sex and heart and how it shows up in our lives and what we're working on right now. But I am so excited to bring this into a group space collaboratively with you because there's so much potential there. Yeah. You know?
I mean, I know we're probably close to, I have no idea how long we've been in, but it seems like it's been a while.
We should move towards the wrapping.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have this like voice in my mind right now of like somebody listening, somebody saying like powerful men. That seems like a scary thing. Like, look at the culture. We have a lot of powerful men and we have a pretty sick culture, you know? And for those who know a lot of like historical lens, there was a long time that the world was primarily run by matriarchs and there was a lot less violence. And there was a lot more art. And there was a lot more music, you know? And to me, sometimes in our work, there's a documentary that's come out of Heart of Men. And so we've been doing a lot of traveling and filming and people are like, what are you filming? And the documentary maker will say something like a movie about men and people will say down with the patriarchy. And I'm like, no, up with powerful men in the way that power actually speaks to. And so to me, if we're talking about a culture or a community full of men who are connected to all of their life force and in the expression of that life force, things are gonna be good. It's not the way that we look at men today. The reason men are doing what we're doing today is because we're so hurting and we're so cut off and we're so blocked from that precious life force. We need to take it from others. We need to violate others. We need to abuse others. We're not capable of being present in our sexuality. But as those blocks become undone, we have the access to a power that wants to be in service to life, including our own life. You know, it's not like the sacrificial man, but he wants to be in service to life's design, you know? And so I'm listening to this, and as I feel the current of our collaboration, Taylor, I'm like, man, you know, we're capping this program because it's not a course. Like, it's an intimate program. We're doing a lot of relational work, a lot of emotional work. And so there's a cap.
When you say cap, you mean limiting the
amount of people. Yeah. There's not a cap to what can happen at all. Like, that cap is kind of blown off.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing a group of guys who are like, I'm fucking ready to show up to my life. Like, life needs something from me. I know it. I deserve something. There's a way that I could feel from life, and I'm ready for that. Like, I'm ready for the conditions that necessitate the healing happening because something so fucking beautiful is calling to me, and I'm ready for that. And as we do this work as men, I really believe life takes its right shape around us. You know, like, to me, the missing ingredient right now in this world that I view is really sick and really diseased, and it quite literally is incredibly diseased, you know, it's not just metaphorical, is men in their proper role, is men connected to life inside of their own derived sense of power, expressing their knowing. And so I'm like, that's what we're trying to do, you know, like, and it's only 9 weeks, and it could be 9 months or 9 years, and it's 9 weeks. And at the end of that, I want those men walking out of there, walking back into all of their respective communities, whether it's startup world, prison work, coaching, whatever it is, community organizing, farming. And I want them to, like, be this beacon of light, of a leader, of that, like, warrior leading the tribe, of leading the pack, that knows what it means to be a man in its truest sense, and knows what it's like to feel a thriving, pulsing connection to life, and knows how to act on that.
Yeah, let's take a deep breath to that. Even you listening.
And it's going to be yummy. It's going to be yummy. You know, like, we're doing work, and there's a way that, like, in the masculine world, it's like, we're doing work. And also the retreat center we're going to be at is my favorite place in the whole world. It's a mile from our house. We're going to be drinking spring water, eating all local, seasonal, organic food, swimming in spring-fed creeks, dancing under the stars, singing. Like, it's going to be a really yummy time.
Totally.
Because to me, the revolution is really yummy.
Yeah. And there will be parts that challenge you, but it will also be fun. Yeah, it's not summer camp, but it is kind of summer camp. Both at the same time. Both at the same time. So if that's something you're interested in, we'll put links to that in the show notes, link to the website so you can check it out. There's a video there. There's outlines of all the things you can expect. And it would be an honor to share the experience with you. And it's going to be an honor to share the experience with you.
I feel that.
I'm looking forward to my own growth from the experience as well.
It's pretty incredible. We're working on the curriculum, finalizing that right now, you know, and it's pretty incredible that, like, we're creating some of the weeks that I just want to learn from you on. I'm like, Taylor, can we touch these topics? Because this is stuff that I'm still wanting to learn.
Yeah.
And so, like, again, we're only able to offer what's moving through us.
Totally.
Taylor and I are not pulling out our folders of teachings and saying, like, let's use these 6 practices and these 4 things we did at this one facilitator training. It's like, what's alive in us right now? Because that's what we can actually bring to the space.
Yeah. And I feel the same too, which is super exciting. And so just to be very clear, like, this is a collaboration, and we're also going to be in the experiences together too. Which is rich. Like, I love when I've been in experiences at retreats or workshops when the facilitators are somehow involved too, you know? And so while I'm leading something, maybe you'll be experiencing it, and vice versa. That's really exciting. And then we all get to stay there and talk about it afterwards and grow and harvest and, like, figure out how it all fits, and then how we want to bring it back into our lives in a beautiful, effective way that lasts.
Yeah.
You know? So that feels like a really potent, poignant way to close the container. Thank you, Thomas, so much for this conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to ask me or bring in or clarify before we close? I'll take a moment to feel into it also.
Yeah. Yeah, Taylor, actually what I want to reflect is not what I thought I wanted to say to people listening, but I want to let you know that I really witness what you're in right now as a person and the growth that you're undergoing and the messages you're receiving and the guidance that's stirring through your own personal work. And I see how alive it is in you. And I see this threshold of what's been the past 7 years of an incredibly successful business building and learning and studying and incredible sexual cultivation. And I see how that's like quite literally rising up from your root into your heart. And now there's this whole other form of expression that's coming through you. Mm. And so I love getting to do this collaboration with you. I love growing as friends and just getting to witness you in that process. And I know what's happening now and what's to come is going to be so much more in service to life because of how you're opening to the deeper layers. And you don't have to. You have like a fucking epic business and you could just keep doing the same thing. Yeah. And like more and more is stacking on top of the base that's been built.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Yeah. And I'll just share an appreciation of you too. I really appreciate the energy and the spaces that you hold. And then when we've met, the meditations or the intention setting experiences that you've led have been really profound and impactful for me. And when we were filming the video that you'll see on the website, we started filming by a creek and then this crazy thunderstorm came out of nowhere and we had to switch locations. But in the beginning of that, you said intentions and a prayer for the filming that was really beautiful and it was recorded. And so there's this part of me that wants to put that on there too, just so people can actually feel that current because it was really rich. Yeah. And yeah, I'm appreciative of that. And also thank you for reaching out and asking, because I've been wanting to facilitate more in-person work over the years, but I knew that I wasn't going to do it myself because I'm very used to doing things myself and I can, and I wanted to collaborate. And I think this is the perfect way in. So I'm so looking forward to it. Thank you for being here for this conversation, for collaborating. Thank you, listener, for being here. And if you have any questions for us, please reach out via email. You can let us know in a comment on YouTube too. I'll check all those and get back to you. And check out the link if you're interested. It's going to be really epic. We're putting our heart and souls into it. And yeah, I'm so stoked.
Yeah. I'll say one last thing. Is that okay?
Please.
That's the perfect closing, and I'll put an asterisk. Is anybody watching this? Like, life wants and needs something from you. And there's something that you have, that only you have, that you came to earth at this very time with, that lives inside of you, that's a result of your ancestry, a result of everything you've experienced, including all of the pain. And there's something only you can offer this earth. And it's like a healthy forest. Every single being plays its perfect part in the ecosystem so life can keep going. And that's no different for you. And so those places where life is blocked, those places where life got stuck, it's not your fault. And there also is a choice to move towards those things, to open towards those things, such that you can walk in the world more as your actual birthright intended, which is to be well, which is to be receiving to life and to be contributing to the thriving of everything around you. And so I believe in that. And I want to hold that reality and vision of possibility for you, that life really wants something from